After a mammoth first album and a fake live album, album number 3 by Typo Negative was, well, finally going to be some new material, but also was meant to do something, well, pretty historic. Bloody Kisses, which was released in 1993, was a landmark album for this band. You could consider it to be a breakout album, although you could also hypothesize that Slow, Deep, and Hard really was no slouch to begin with. However, with Bloody Kisses, it was the tracks that were on them. At this point, the subtle blend of humor and the gothic nature of their music that's interlaced and interwoven with the doom and drone melodies that also has the punk crust was getting to be well known in circles all around the globe. However, Bloody Kisses was going to be the album that was going to push Typo Negative over the top and become a true force in modern metal at a time frame where, well, grunge was king. With Bloody Kisses, 2 singles were spawned, Christian Woman and, of course, Black Number 1. And, of course, in shortened versions, both songs received significant airplay, not to mention they were also seen on various television shows on MTV, such as Headbangers Ball. This was gaining the band a whole hell of a lot more exposure to a whole hell of a lot more people. The funny thing about this album, however, is the fact that it is more of a stereotypical bashing or a tongue-in-cheek style of humor towards some of the very things that their music would signify to kind of embrace. In Black Number 1, you definitely see that it is kind of a mockery, but also a praising of the goth girl or goth guy subculture, which has recently got a reboom and a reboot, where they do everything based around Halloween. You know, they dress in all black. They must have that Black Number 1 hair dye or that Black Number 1 fingernail polish, and it just overall is a idea that they are meant to scare everybody, and you know what I mean. This form of parody was something that Typo Negative was already becoming pretty well known for. However, this was the one that was really kind of over the top, considering it was their way of maybe even going in a little tongue-in-cheek and jabbing at their own fans. We Hate Everybody was in a response to their first world tour whenever they were overseas and were, well, pretty much mislabeled as white supremacists or Nazi loyalists. So We Hate Everyone basically was able to infuse the idea that they really didn't give a shit. They basically hated everybody. And of course, that tongue-in-cheek way, that tongue-in-cheek humor, that only Peter Steele and the boys from Typo Negative really have been able to implant in music in a significant way in the past 20 years. Now, the other songs on the album are also no slouches either. This is actually an album that is chock full of variety, but also just good, solid music. During the middle section of this album, you are able to hear a lot more of that fast, aggressive sound that is more documented by the crust punk roots that Peter Steele had in Carnivore, and you also hear the Seals and Crofts Summer Breeze, the cover that was just absolutely fantastic. It was done in that gothic style. It was also something where instead of taking it up in the chorus, which is what you hear in the Seals and Croft version, instead he opted to take it down even lower, exposing his deep, deep voice even more so. In fact, that's something that runs rampant on this album, which actually builds a lot more depth. It builds a lot more in the way of atmosphere, considering his voice can go to such low registers that it actually is able to magnify the meaning of the lyrics and also beautifully weave itself in with the music that is playing behind it. Now, once you reach the latter part of the album, that starts to take a little bit of a turn. In the title track, Bloody Kisses, you hear a little bit more of what you experienced on Slow, Deep, and Hard, where you hear the droning, you hear the doom-laden sound. It's a very slow, slowed down pace, and it's able to really show it in the power of the delivery of the lyrics and also in its 10-minute clock time. It's something that's seen a little bit also in a few of the other tracks on the final part of the album. However, this is the primary example that really, really shines forth. Overall, Bloody Kisses was just a fantastic record chock with variety, and like I said, really pushed this band over the top. But it also was an album that reached some historic acclaim. This was the first Roadrunner album to ever hit platinum status, and it was done so after Roadrunner was very, very concerned about this band with the origin of the feces. Basically, got a slap in the face by the band by having them make a fake live record whenever they wanted an actual live record. So, Already, you could definitely tell that the tongue-in-cheek humor extended more than just in the music, but it was something that the band embraced in their everyday lives, despite all of the different things that perhaps could be constituted as damaging that surrounded them. So, with Roadrunner now appeased with this platinum-selling release, and history being made for this, really budding record label, Type O Negative, you could honestly say, kind of had a pass from here on out if you really wanted to. Well, at least until the middle part of the 2000s, once they finally left Roadrunner. But this album is definitely a testament of magnificence in and of itself. Unlike Slow, Deep, and Hard, this is an album that was able to embrace a lot more of the different styles that perhaps were intermixed within each track of Slow, Deep, and Hard, so it gave them the opportunity to shine forth individually, as opposed to being a singular part of a greater whole. Also, with this album, their tongue-in-cheek humor became a little bit more apparent with, little tracks in there, such as Dark Side of the Womb, which actually, instead of really seeming all that humorous, can sometimes, with some people, really come off as truly horrific, considering the different images that could be potentially conjured up whenever you hear a screaming baby and then you hear someone basically sounding like they're either moaning or at least grunting or gasping in the background. Well, I know my mind only goes to a couple different things, and none of them are good. Jerry Sandusky, Jerry Sandusky, Jerry Sandusky. But at any rate, this is a tremendous album. This is a landmark release for this band. It's a landmark release for Roadrunner Records. Really, many people would say that this was Type O Negative writing their best album of their career, and in that, I would have to disagree with them. We have not yet talked about that album. In fact, we're not going to talk about that album next, but we'll get to it. Believe me.